Welcome to Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector podcast. I am your host, Tabatha L. Tonight kicks off part two of the preliminary electrical requirements as we prepare for the wall rough cover phase. Last week, I walked you through some processes that we needed to do before we got inside of the construction project. That's called ground rough. So that's step one. Now we're on step two, the wall covers. So one of the things that I get a lot when I do wall covers is when I first come on the job, now we're in the phase where everything is push. We got to go faster. So I can come on the job and the electrician, they'll ask, well, hey, we have the general, he wants to know, can we start putting MC cables in the walls? Or can we start putting EMT conduit in the walls? The problem with that I have had situations with would be the weather. If you don't have a roof on your construction project or you don't have windows in at that time, that's a risk that you're taking with the environment. What that means is with the weather, if there's no windows and there's no roof, you're going to have, if it rains, you're going to have rain on your conductors. That's aluminum. And if those wiring methods are not corrosive proof or they don't have anything to protect them from the environment and they're not conducive to that environment, you're going to have rust issues. So that's something that I wanted to state tonight before we get into it, that if you do not have windows and if you do not have a roof, you're not going to get a wall cover. That's basically protecting you. Because there are times that I have come on jobs and it could have rained last night. And if I see a leak coming from the roof and you're calling me there for rough cover, I want to see that whole project now. I'm going to walk over by the leak and I want to see what's going on over there, because that's something that you have to control. And if there's enough water that's on your wiring methods, your MC or your EMT, that could prompt me to tell you to replace it. It just depends on how much water it has accumulated in the box or on the wiring method. If I see rust or anything that will stand out to make me believe that it deteriorated or it's not going to work properly after you turn it on, I will suggest that you replace it. So that's one thing I just want to make sure you all understand. Get the leaks in order before you install your wiring methods. So after we have addressed that, now I would like to see your approved set of plans. That's the next thing. So for the approved set of plans, I want to know what we're building here. So that'll tell me a lot. When I look at the approved set of plans, I'm going to see what type of building, what's going on here. It's a hotel, if it's a hospital, what type of facility we have here, because that's going to tell me what type of wiring methods are required. This is why I want to know that. So I'm going to also ask the primary electrician that's on the job, because sometimes with the larger jobs, you have subcontractors. So I'm going to ask who's doing what, who's doing the fire alarm, who's doing the data, who's doing the security. I need to know these things because the wall cover is happening now. And a lot of times, the fire alarm and the low voltage, they're not awarded that early on in the job. The general contractors, they have no idea who's going to do the low voltage. And normally if I ask that question, they'll tell me the owner is going to provide that. And that's what I've said to you all in the past. If you have low voltage, you need to have a permit. So this is why I need to know that. For wall covers, I need to know for the fire alarms, the fire alarm devices must go in a box. It doesn't have to go in the walls, but if they are, I need to know that at the time. With the fire alarm, the horn strobes, the pull stations, I need to know who's doing what. The electrician, they normally do the stub outs for the data or the low voltage if they don't know who's doing that. So they'll stub out of the wall to get out of the wall for the next contractor to come and do the filling work, which would be to install the data, the fire alarm, or whatever else that needs to be installed. So this is why I need to know who's doing what, when, and how, and why. So we need to do the wall cover to get out of the wall. Okay, so with that being said, when we're doing the wall covers and you don't know who's doing what and we're done with the wall covers, this is new construction. That being said, you're not allowed to cut in boxes, what we call like fishing the walls, because at this particular stage, this is new construction. So depending on what you're installing, you're going to have to cut from stud to stud, cut that drywall out if you add something later. If you add or miss something, you're going to have to cut stud to stud, cut a piece of drywall off, put whatever box you need or support you need, and we usually call it, you can use any type of mud ring or support bracket. It just has to you just have to make sure that it doesn't have a void in the back. Like you have to make sure that the wall cover is not a column or it doesn't have a false wall in the back, so that the box is securely fastened to that structure. So this is why you can't cut it in at a later date. We prefer for you to cut it from wall to wall, and then you're going to need a support within 12 inches of that box, and I will allow you to cut 2 spots out for the supports if you're fishing in. Now, that's the only way you're going to fish. You're going to have to support it with the box, the proper box support, and support the cable. So you can't use a cut-in box with 2 men in a boat. You can't do that. That's for the cut-in boxes or for remodel jobs or alteration jobs. And when they miss stuff like this, it's usually because the owners at a later date, when the walls are all done, the owners are coming in, and then they may not like where something's at, and then that's where the extras come in. Now they want you to move something. So I'm giving you this information up front because if that's the case, that's what's going to happen. I want you to know this because it's not easy to just move something around because you don't want it there. So it's going to take them some time and effort to get that done. So moving on, the wall cover issues that I have had on some of my inspections would be the installation, like to use the Article 110.3b, installation of use, listed in label, equipment shall be installed and used in accordance with the instructions included in the listing and labels. So I'll give you an example of why I'm saying what I'm saying with the listing and labeling. So for commercial jobs, if I go into a restroom or a bathroom, if I see something odd, that's when I'll start to ask questions. Normally, you do not see an exhaust fan in a wall. So if I see that, I'll ask the electrician, why is that exhaust fan in the wall? And they'll say, well, that's where it says to put it on the print. So I say, do you have the manufacturer's instructions? And if they provide those to me, we'll read through. And that's where the listing and labeling, the installation use comes in. Because if the manufacturer says ceiling mount only, you can't mount it in the wall. So that's why I would want to know something like that, because you have to use it according to the listing and labeling requirements. So that's why I'm mentioning that. Just make sure you read the instructions so you'll know how to install it, come across every day. Another thing I have come across when I'm doing inspections on the walls is this support for cables called CJ6, Colorado gem supports. So the manufacturer instructions, because I've had this several times and had this conversation with several electricians. If you read the instructions on the box, and I don't want to give any brand names, but most of them are going to tell you the same thing. You only can have 4 cables, MC cables. That's the maximum allowed, and that's the listing and labeling part of it. It's only 4 allowed for MC cables through a metal stud. Romex, in commercial jobs, you do some structures do allow you to use Romex. So you have to check the construction building codes on that, because you are allowed to use Romex in certain areas of those jobs. So if you have a Colorado gem, 6 cables are allowed only in a wood stud. That's something that you need to pay attention to, because I've come across several times where there was more. They tried to bunch in more than 4 cables. If you look at that Colorado gem, you really can't get more than 4 cables in there, but somehow they try. Another thing I've noticed with the Colorado gems, and this is just one thing that I've noticed. There are other ways to support the MC cables, but these are what issues that I've seen when I'm doing inspections. You can't mount a Colorado gem vertical. Yeah, vertical. They're not allowed to be mounted vertical. Vertical. That means like, up in the ceiling. So they're not allowed to be mounted vertical. Read the manufacturer's instructions on that. The one thing I would say about making sure that you install it according to the manufacturer's instructions is because there's a liability in there, and a responsibility would go back on the electrical contractor. So if there's something that happens on that job and it's not installed according to the manufacturer's instructions and that's called out or that's caught, you're going to be responsible for that. So just make sure that you read it and understand what you're installing and how to properly install it. Here's another article I would like to bring up. Article 110.12, workmanship. If I come on a job and I see MC cables, and as you know with the studs, some studs line up, some don't. An electrician that really cares about workmanship or craftsmanship, they're going to try to find that one stud, and they're going to try to where the holes all line up. If it's up high or low, they're going to try to find that and run the MC cables through that. That's what you call workmanship and taking pride in what you're doing. Now, if I come on a job and I see that cable going zigzag, that's going to, I will talk to you, but you shouldn't do that, because that's not taking pride in your work. The feedback I get from that, if I say something to the electrician, is that no one can see it behind drywall. But you know what you did. I know what you did, and that's just not showing quality work. So just do it in a workmanlike manner. I know no one sees it, but just take pride in what you're doing. That's going to draw my attention to other things as well, because I'm going to say to myself, if they didn't care about putting it in like that just because someone couldn't see it, what else are they concealing? So that just will draw my attention to you more. That's just a word I would like to share with you how I think. Something else would be unused openings in the boxes. So if you make a mistake in the box, in the junction box, you're not going to use that opening. You need to plug it with a KO, a knockout enclosure. That's something that needs to be done, because we don't want to risk anything dropping in that box if the parts are live that could cause a fire or any type of electrical shock hazard. So if you don't use it, just plug it with a KO. Another An example of an unused opening that I've seen on my jobs would be if to use a double barrel MC connector, but you installed one MC connector in that double barrel. You decided to take a different route with your cables, and you don't use the other hole in the double barrel. I've had electricians ask me, can we just use fire-stopping caulking to just plug that hole? No, and I'll leave it at that. Do the work, take it out, replace it with a single. Caulking it with fire caulking is not allowed. So I want to go over some wiring methods for healthcare construction facilities that I'm having in my area lately. The issues that I'm having is that we're having a large number of different type of healthcare facilities, because the normal healthcare facility places are hospitals, clinics, dental offices, places such as that. But we're having an influx of different patient care, we can say patient care areas. So one of the things that I will do, like I mentioned earlier, when I go on a project, I want to see the approved set of plans, because I want to know what's going in here, because I need to know the wiring methods. So if I look at your print and I look for the keywords, and if it says any type of, I'll give you an example. I wrote a list of healthcare places, healthcare facilities. You got the dental offices, the clinics, urgent care facilities, ear, nose, and throat facilities, podiatrists, blood banks. That's something that people don't really take into consideration. Eye care facilities. This is one that's coming up a lot in my area. I don't want to say the company name, but cosmetics, like if cosmetic, like their cosmetic places, like if you're going to have laser treatments, facial treatments, Botox, anything to do with your skin, hair loss facilities. Those are considered patient care areas. I have been questioned about that, to be honest. And when I look at the approved set of plans, like I will request, and if it has on there, it will say examining rooms, because the entire facility doesn't have to be wired in, we call it hospital grade MC. What you need is a redundant ground. It's just a backup ground just in case anything happens. That's two forms of grounding. So you can use that redundant ground. Hold on, let me get my book. The wiring methods that you can use in a healthcare facility would be EMT. You can use FMC up to 6 feet, type AC, type MC, all purpose. You cannot use PVC and you cannot use MC, because we know why. I don't want to get really into why you can't, but that's what you need would be a redundant ground. So if I look at your prints, and if it says on your prints, examining room, that's the red flag for me, because most of the electricians that are doing those projects, they will say that they often point the finger to someone that they didn't call it out for a redundant ground. They didn't call it out for MC. But if it has patient care, where it has an examining room, where you have to get on a bed, if you look up the definition, let me tell you the definition of patient care, it'll tell you, I don't want to quote it off the top of my head really, but it does state that if it's somewhere you have a examining bed, that's one of the indications that you're going to be treated. So please keep that and take that in consideration when you're bidding these type of jobs, any type of cosmetic procedures, laser, facial treatments, even if it's a treatment, hair loss facilities. Those are things that are really popping up, and you just need to take that in consideration, because if you run just regular MC, you're going to have to remove it, and that's going to cost a pretty penny. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. And another thing I want to point out while I'm talking about the wall covers, and we talked about ground covers last week, and if you didn't get a chance to hear that, go back to episode 9 and you can get some pointers on the ground roof. But add this to your ground roof covers. If you're going to do a patient care facility, if you have any medical equipment that's fixed, that needs a metal raceway. If you have medical chairs that are fixed, like operating tables, x-ray equipment, dental chairs are a big one. You cannot use PVC if you're installing a dental chair. It's a fixed piece of equipment. You can find these. You can find it in Article 51713A. Go there and look for the receptacles and fixed electrical equipment in patient care areas. So just please keep that in mind. If you're going to run any type of metal raceways and you have those type of fixed equipments, please use metal raceways. So other issues that I've had on commercial construction projects, like I mentioned, you can use NM cable, Romex cable. It's permitted, but here's the problem if you use Romex that I've had. The bushings. If you're going to run Romex or non-metallic cable through a metal stud, you need a bushing. A bushing is required. Okay, so that's something that I've had. And I want to explain, this is an issue that I have in hotels, retail stores, and those condominiums, the retail spaces that I was telling you about maybe a couple of weeks ago when I did the multi-family dwellings and the multi-purpose use. When you have the condominiums and you have the retail space, here's something that I have often, and this could be a big issue if you did not take it into consideration when you're bidding the jobs. So if you have junction boxes that are located within a demising wall, and we know what a demising wall is, it's separating two tenants, and you have a junction box for the one tenant on one side, and you have a junction box, and when I say junction boxes, I'm referring to power, electrical power, 120, 240, electrical power. And if it's in the same stud cavity, you're going to need what we call putty pads. It's fire protection for those boxes, because the boxes, you can use putty pads or you can use a fire rated box. But the putty pads, I've heard, are cheaper. And the reason why you want to protect those 120 circuits or the power side of it is because if you have a fire located, if a fire starts in one side of that space, you want to contain it in that wall cavity. So that dimension, I think I mentioned it was 24 inches. So if it's in that same stud cavity, you have to have the putty pad. So you want to contain it. So if it breaks out in either one of those boxes, it will be contained. That's the purpose of the putty pad or the fire-rated boxes, is to make sure that it doesn't spread in that wall cavity and just spread throughout that entire space. So take that in consideration if you're going to if you have back-to-back spaces and you're sharing the walls. Please take that in consideration. And I've had that in hotels because, one room is located on the one side and you're sharing a wall space. So that could happen in hotels and, like I said, retail stores and the condos. So just take that into consideration. And I had an electrician ask me, well, where's that at in the code? Article 300.21. And it actually spells that out and says that. Look into that. I'm going to move right along. MC cable in direct. So we're going to go out to the loading dock, because sometimes you have to run cables, wall covers or cables outside in the loading dock area. And an issue that or if you're in the building and you're going up to the ceiling, or you may have a concrete wall in the building, and in that space, it may not get drywall, but just a brand new fresh slab of concrete. MC cable cannot come in direct contact with concrete, because it will deteriorate and it will cause that jacket to break down. Now, there are other ways you can use it. You can use steel MC cables, or depending on the environmental space, you can use PVC coated MC. But you cannot use that. You may not be able to use it in the ceiling. It just depends on what the architect or whoever decided what that ceiling is, plenum rated, or what that ceiling is above. So how we resolve that is you need a barrier between the MC and the concrete wall. So you can either use what we call a MAC 2, or you can put a washer behind the MC cable. And then that will compensate for it riding the entire length, because you're going to have a barrier there to protect it and keep it off of the wall and to allow it to last as long as it possibly can. So I did speak to you about the junction boxes, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. The junction boxes shall be securely fastened in place, and they must be supported by building structure. Find that in Article 314.23. And that's what I was trying to explain earlier. I think I got ahead of myself a little bit with the junction boxes. Like, 'cause sometimes you may have a column and it's a false wall behind that column. And depending on the type of bracket you use for your junction box, whether it's a spreader bar or or the different types, the back of that junction box has to be supported. So how I look at that is, if you're plugging in a receptacle, and if you look at the motion of your hand, you're plugging in that receptacle, you're pushing it into the wall. Eventually, if it's not adequately supported in the back, it's going to break off. So you would need a bar, what we call a spreader bar in the back, so that it won't push and break off. It just needs to be securely fastened to building structure. So that's something that you need to take into consideration if you have a false wall. Another thing that I have had on these jobs, plastic junction boxes, because remember, depending on the structure, you can use Romex. But what you can't do, you can't use a metal mud ring on a plastic junction box. Check Article 250.110. If you do that, you just need a grounding clip, what they call a grounding clip, to clip to the metal mud ring, because it doesn't have an effective grounding path if it's plastic to metal. I've seen that on occasions. So I want to bring that up to you as well. In my job area that I normally do, I do a lot of high-rise buildings. And I guess because they're high-rise buildings, they love shades, electric shades. The issue that I've had with electric shades, the electric shade junction boxes, because they're so close to the window pane, you barely can put your head in there to see what you're doing. So just take that in consideration, that you need the access. You need to be able to see what you're doing. Like that technician, that electrician, when they come there for a service call, you need to see what you're servicing and what you're repairing. So that article would be 314.29. You just have to have access and make sure you can just view what you're seeing. Something that I have seen on my projects are what we call prefab modular walls. If for whatever reason you want these prefab modular walls, they must be listed as a complete assembly. Just to give you an idea of what they are, I'll give you the problems. Article 110.3b, the listing, prefab with the MC cables, the wires, the junction boxes, all of these things come with the prefab wall. Just depending on what you want in that wall, you can come with fire alarm, data, anything you want is in that wall if you decide to go that route. But it has to meet the minimum requirements of the code. So what we're going to ask you for would be to make sure that it's listed before you get there. Because now I've had that issue where it isn't listed. So the electricians, they want to know, can we remove everything out of the wall and we replace it? That's a case-by-case situation, because normally when that comes out on the job from the factory, you don't really want to take responsibility for something like that. It's already been that at the factory, they already installed that. So that would be something that I would have to take to my superiors and ask them if that's something we're going to allow on the prefab walls. So just remember to check for the listings if they have electrical components. A common issue that I have, MC cables or FMC, flexible metal conduit, raceways must be supported within 12 inches of the junction box. That's a common issue that I have. I want to give you that code article so you can reference it. Article 330.30. If I come there and if I see it in a few locations, I may not say anything. I may not make you redo it. What I would probably tell you is just to keep in mind that needs to be 12 inches. But if it's several locations, then you would need to drop it down to the 12 inches just to get that in your mind, not to let it be over. Because if it's 16 inches or more, 14, that's just too much throughout the entire job. So those are a few of the things that I have had on my rough cover inspections. And I just wanted to bring those things up because these are the things that will fail your inspections. So I just wanted to tell you those things. But I do have two questions that I wanted to answer for someone that has asked me these questions. So the first question is electrical outlets. Can a homeowner change them out themselves if they have exposed wiring? If you have the experience, you are allowed to change out a few receptacles in your house. You're just not allowed to go in someone else's house and change them out. But if it's your own home and you have the experience and you're not afraid, you are allowed to change them out. I would suggest that you just turn the breaker off, make sure that it's not energized, and change it out. Another suggestion that I would make for you as the homeowner is something that we do in the trade. When we are installing receptacles, a safe practice is to wrap a layer of tape around that receptacle terminals before you place it back in the wall. I don't know if you have metal boxes or plastic boxes, but that's something that we do. Just a layer of tape, 1 or 2 wraps, and that'll protect you when you're putting it back in or if it shakes around, but just make sure you turn off the power. Okay, so that's a 2-part question here. It says, how long can you keep a cord that has tape on it let me read that over. How long can you keep a cord that has tape on it to cover exposed wires? Or should you just replace the appliance for safety? So I'm assuming that this question is because it said replace the appliance. So this must be an appliance plug. And if you have electrical tape on your appliance plug, that already is a red flag because the integrity of the circuit has been compromised. So if you see conductors, get rid of the cord. If it, depending on what type of appliance it is, if it's a dryer, you can go to one of the hardware stores and get a new plug. If it's a stove or oven, you can buy a new plug because that's a serious safety hazard if you're seeing conductors. And if they are exposed, that's a serious issue because if, depending on the location, if the floor is wet, those conditions are not going to be good for you. So you can replace it. Just go to the local hardware store and get a new cord. You do not have to replace the appliance if it's nothing wrong with the appliance, but you can buy a new cord. The second question that I received, this is a local question. So thank you, St. Louis, for listening. I do not want to say the municipality, but I recognize this municipality. It says, my house is being looked at by this municipality. They gave me a list of things I need to fix. One of the things on the list is a receptacle by the sump pump in the basement. They're saying that it needs to be ground fault protected. But the thing is, when I first moved in my house in 2018, it passed inspection. I'm not sure why it failed inspection this time. Well, I can tell you that there is a new code. So if you purchased your house in 2018, the 2024 code states that you do need to have your sump pump. The article that you need to reference is the 2020 code, Article 422.5A, A6. GFCI protection for all sump pumps. So if you purchased your home in 2018, and now if you recently, I'm assuming, had a new inspection, it's 2024, so the code changed. So that's why they're catching it now, and they may not have caught it then because it wasn't a code article. Well, it wasn't an issue, or they just didn't catch it, but they are correct that you do need to have a GFCI protection for your sump pump. If they're on 2020, that's what it is. And this municipality, I can tell you, they are on 2020. So it is required. So next Wednesday, I would like to continue with a list of common electrical issues that I have found doing the ceiling cover inspections. And then I would like to continue this process until we get to the complete final end of the project. So next week, we're going to do ceiling covers. And the week after that, we're going to do a temp on service. And the week after that, we're going to do a temp out. We're just going to walk through the process so that we can make the construction jobs easier and have less failures on some of the. So I would like to thank you for tuning in tonight. If you have any questions or comments or any feedback, please contact me on any of the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, under the moniker Ask the Lady Electrical Inspection. Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector. If you would like to add anything to this discussion, please email me at asktheladyelectricalinspector@gmail.com with any questions or concerns. Thank you and good night.